Hello everyone, it's Crystal. Today I am here to discuss embroidery supplies. If you are thinking about purchasing your first embroidery machine, I am here to share with you the basic supplies you need for that endeavor. The first thing you need to consider is what kind of table will you keep your embroidery machine on. An embroidery machine is something, they're fairly heavy, even the ones that have smaller hoops. So ideally, your embroidery machine will be stationed in one location all the time. An embroidery machine is not something that you want to pack up after each use. So I'm going to focus on single needle embroidery machines. That's a good beginner machine. There are 6 needle embroidery machines, 10 needle embroidery machines, and even 15 needle embroidery machines. But for a beginner, a single needle embroidery machine is sufficient. So once you decide where you will store your embroidery machine, you can think about what your budget is. I always say, buy the biggest hoop that you can afford. These right here are embroidery hoops. I first learned about my first embroidery machine at a quilt show. I went to a quilt show, I saw different embroidery machines, and I played around with different embroidery machines. And it just so happens that the one that I really liked turned out to be the one I bought. I didn't buy it at the time. I learned about my embroidery machine at a quilt show in March of 2017. I did more research, and the embroidery machine that I finally purchased a year and a half later, October of 2018, it actually was the machine that I played with in March at the quilt show. So my machine is the Brother NQ 1400E. It comes with a 6x10 hoop. This is the 6x10 hoop. So the area that you would embroider in is right here, 6 inches by 10 inches. This is a 5x7 hoop, 5 inches by 7 inches. This is the part of the hoop that attaches to the embroidery machine. And then there are machines that the largest hoop is a 4x4 hoop. This is 4 inches by 4 inches. So consider what your budget is. Consider how much you want to do embroidery, how many items you want to embroider. And then when you see a machine and it says largest hoop is a 4x4, you know that this is the area that you're working in, and you'll have to select designs that fit in this area. If you have designs that only fit in a 5x7 hoop, you will not be able to use them on your machine because your machine only reads designs that are 4x4. So that's the first thing to consider. And once you buy your machine, you can buy additional hoops. Like I have this hoop right here. It's, I think, 2x3. It's designed to do monograms on sleeves and other small areas. So this was an extra purchase that I made. And if you know someone who has an embroidery machine, you know that you need to know the format of your machine. As I said previously, I have a Brother machine. The Brother format is PES. So when I download designs, Brother has a website called iBroidery.com where you can purchase embroidery designs to use on your Brother machines. And then there's another website that I like to go to. It's called Designs by Juju, Juju. She has a lot of cute designs. I have purchased a lot of her designs since I have gotten my embroidery machine. So once you decide once you know what your format is for your embroidery designs, you can shop for designs. And once you shop for designs, you can download the designs on the computer. And then you need to make sure you have a thumb drive so that you can transfer files from your computer to your embroidery machine. If you don't have a thumb drive, make sure you have a cord that can transfer files from your computer to your embroidery machine. So once you decide your machine, what size hoop you will have, and your machine is in your house, you need to have thread. There are two types of embroidery thread. There's polyester and then there's rayon. I use polyester thread because polyester thread is color fast. If I embroidered, say I have this red thread, these are ponytail holders from Dollar Tree. I use that to hold my thread tails in. So polyester, say I wanted to use this thread to embroider a design on a white shirt. If I bleach the white shirt, this will still stay the color. This will not fade with bleach. So that's one thing to consider. That's why I buy rayon embroidery thread. And I keep my thread, this is only part of my thread. This is the first, I bought a starter kit on Amazon in October 2018 when I bought my embroidery machine. So this was in my starter kit. I have other embroidery threads, but I don't embroider. This is a lot of thread. I didn't think it was going to last as long because I do a significant amount of embroidery, but there are a lot of different colors. Like, for example, this one is not even open yet. So polyester thread versus rayon thread. So that's another consideration. And needles. I previously did a video about sewing machines, and the sewing machine needles are the same size as embroidery machine needles in terms of the classification, but the needle itself does look different. So you should not use sewing machine needles on your embroidery machine. You should purchase needles that are specifically designed for embroidery machines. So there's the 80-12. The one number is an American number, the other number is an international number. The higher the number, the larger the I is for, the larger the I and the needle are for your designs. This is 7511. This is also 7511. This is 80-12, and this is a B. This is a ballpoint needle. So if I'm embroidering a design on knit fabric, like a t-shirt, a sweatshirt, a sweater, I would use ballpoint needles. So that's what the B stands for this. If I'm doing applique, applique is when you take a smaller fabric and you attach it to a larger background fabric. When I do an applique, I use the 90/14 embroidery needles. And I'll talk more about applique in a second. And this is the embroidery foot. I purchased a separate foot that has a red laser so I can pinpoint exactly where I want my embroidery design. So this is the foot that actually came with, the presser foot that came with my embroidery machine. This is a standard foot. This is the bottom, and it attaches to my machine like this, but I wanted better placement of my designs. So I purchased the presser foot with the laser. So once you have your thread, once you have your needles, and you're ready to do a project, you also need bobbin thread. I purchased pre-wound bobbin thread. You can also take a bobbin and you can wind, your machine should have a bobbin winder. You can take embroidery thread and wind it on a bobbin. However, usually people don't see the back of your embroidery design. So I use pre-wound embroidery thread. I got this from Amazon. There were 144 bobbins in this box. I'm still working through it. And there's a lot of thread on this bobbin. So this has lasted me a long time. So you need embroidery thread. You can wind your own bobbins, or you can buy pre-wound. This is a faster deal. If you're not sure you want to do embroidery, my suggestion is to wind your own bobbins or buy a smaller box. This is 144, as I mentioned. You may be able to find a smaller box until you know whether or not you want to stay with embroidery. So, when you're ready to do a design, take your hoop. You need stabilizer, and then you need fabric. This is a fat quarter. This is cotton fabric. This is 18 by 22 inches. This is 1/4 of a yard of cotton fabric. So you would take your fabric, however much you need for your project, and then you would take stabilizer. Stabilizer usually comes on a roll like this. There are several types of stabilizer, but I'm only going to focus on the 3 main ones you need as a beginner. This is tearaway stabilizer. It looks and feels like paper. You would use tearaway stabilizer on woven fabrics, such as cotton. You would put the stabilizer in the hoop. There are 2 parts of the hoop. You would place your stabilizer on the bottom. You would put your cotton fabric on the top, and then you would place the inner hoop back. And then you would make sure everything is taut, not tight, just taut. And then you would be ready to embroider your design. So, tearaway stabilizer. I bought this about a year ago. It was a roll. It was 50 yards, I believe, on the roll. So, woven fabrics. And once you finish your embroidering your design, you would just tear off the stabilizer, throw it away. There's also Cutaway Stabilizer. On Cutaway Stabilizer, you would use that on a t-shirt, a sweatshirt, a sweater, and you would cut away the excess around the perimeter of your embroidery design. You would keep the Cutaway Stabilizer in the body of your embroidery design, because that would give more stability to your design for when you wear the item, whether it's a sweatshirt or t-shirt. If you have a t-shirt or a sweatshirt that has embroidery on it, look on the inside and you will see the Cutaway Stabilizer still there within the design. And if you're going to do towels or robes or any kind of, if you're going to embroider any kind of fabric that has a pile, then you need some water-soluble stabilizer. It looks like plastic. You put it on top of your, like say this was a robe or a towel. Once I hooped it, I would put this on top so that to make sure that my stitches don't sink into the pile. And then once your design is done, you can, I have a spray bottle, I just spray and then it just melts. Or you can place if it's a gift, I just use the spray bottle. If it's a design for myself, then I put the item in a washing machine. So think about what kind of items you will embroider on, and that will determine what kind of stabilizer you use. I do a lot of embroidery on towels. That's why I bought this. And I usually do a small design. That's why I didn't buy a large roll of it. These are 7 by 7 sheets, and there were 100 in this packet. So I mentioned applique, and I wanted to talk about applique. Applique, as I mentioned, is when you take a smaller fabric. Say this was shaped like a snowman, and I wanted to applique a snowman on this larger background fabric. There are two ways to do it. You still would hoop your background fabric and your stabilizer. You have a certain design. You would load that design onto your embroidery machine. If you have a ScanNCut, let me start there. I have a Brother ScanNCut, and the ScanNCut will take my design and cut it into the shape. Say I wanted the letter C, and I cut it out with my ScanNCut. I will have that letter C, and I would place it onto my background fabric that's in the hoop. There are several parts to an applique design for embroidery. First, the first thing that stitches out is the placement stitch. So the placement stitch was stitch and let me know where to place my C, place my fabric. If I have a ScanNCut, I will already have the C cut out, and then I would place it there. And then the next stitch would be a tack down stitch. The tack down stitch would stitch down my C onto my background. And then the third stitch would be a satin stitch or some other nice, pretty stitch to finish off the project. The reason I started talking about the ScanNCut is because sometimes if you don't have a ScanNCut, you just need to take a piece of fabric as a square and then lay it on here. Lay it on the placement stitches. And then once the tack down stitches are done, then you would take some applique scissors. This is one type of applique scissor. You see it's curved here. And then you would cut your top fabric around the tack down stitches to cut away the excess. So I have these, I have two pair of applique scissors. If you're not going to do applique, then you don't need these scissors. But if you are going to do applique, I'll show you an example of applique on a quilt. If you're going to do applique, then you need and you don't have a ScanNCut, you need these. If you have a Brother ScanNCut, the ScanNCut will cut out your shape. So all you have to do is place the shape on top of your background fabric. This is another pair of applique scissors. They're called duckbill. This also helps you cut away the excess fabric if you don't have a ScanNCut and you need to cut away the excess fabric for your shape for your applique design. So just to review, if you're doing applique, this is your background fabric, it's in the hoop. You have your applique piece, and you can put this piece directly on your background fabric. For the best results, I suggest you purchase some Heat and Bond Light. It's an iron-on adhesive. And this package, the purple package, you can sew through the Heat and Bond Light. I'll show you what it looks like. On one side is paper. It's paper. The other side has the adhesive. So you would sew this side to the back of your applique piece. Then you would remove this paper and then place your applique piece onto the background fabric. So when it does the tack down stitch, then you can remove you have two choices. You can remove your embroidery hoop and then iron it. Iron your applique piece to the background. Place your embroidery hoop back into the machine, and then it'll do the final pretty satin stitches. That's one option. The second option is after you have the tack down, you have the placement stitches. You put your applique piece here with the Heat and Bond Light on the back, and then it does the tack down stitches. I have this mini iron. This is not necessary. If you don't do applique, you don't even need to think about this. But if you want to start doing applique, you have two choices. Like I said, you can remove the hoop, take it to the ironing board, or you can use this. Once the tack down stitches are done, this gets very hot, and this is a mini iron, and then you would iron it so that the applique piece is ironed to the background fabric. When I use this, I made this little board here. I think it's a 5x7, 6x7, 5x7 board, and I stick this under my hoop so that I don't burn the platform of my embroidery machine, and then I just iron this when I do applique. Like I said, I have a scan and cut, so I'm not going to have a square piece of fabric, so I don't use these scissors too often. I will have an actual shape, and then, but that's extra steps, that's extra cost. I don't know how crafty you are, but those are things to consider. So once again, just as by way of review, you need a stable table for your embroidery machine. Embroidery machines tend to be heavier than sewing machines, so you don't really want to pack it up after each use. Think about the hoop size that you can afford. Think about the type of projects you want to create. Make sure you have a thumb drive so that you can transfer files from your computer through the thumb drive to your embroidery machine. You can also purchase a wire that goes from your computer to your embroidery machine. You can purchase, if you have a Brother embroidery machine, you can purchase designs from iBroidery. I purchased some designs from there. They have Marvel designs, Star Wars designs. Those are officially licensed to Brother. I also buy my embroidery designs from designsbyjuju.com. Stabilizers. You need, if you're going to do a lot of t-shirts, then you need a lot of Cutaway Stabilizer. If you're going to do a lot of woven fabrics, cotton, etc., you need Tearaway Stabilizer. If you're going to do towels, bathrobes, any kind of fabric with pile, you need water soluble stabilizer, and that goes on top. Two types of thread. There's polyester thread, which is color fast, and then there's rayon thread. Decide which one you prefer. Bobbins, you can use embroidery thread to wind your bobbins, or you can buy pre-wound bobbins, which save time and energy. Needles, if you are embroidering through a fabric that is thin, you probably want maybe a 70-10 needle. If you're embroidering through maybe cotton and it's just a regular cotton, 100% cotton, you may want to use the 80-12. If you're embroidering through knit fabrics, you need a ballpoint needle. If you're doing applique, I usually use a 90-14 when I do applique, because you're going through your background fabric, you're going through your applique piece, and I always use Heat and Bond Light. So that's another layer. It's thin, but there's still a layer that the needle has to go through. So that's why I use the 90-14. When I do applique, I use my scan and cut to cut out my shape. That actually saves a lot of time in the long run, because you don't have to fiddle with these scissors, go around and around. I use this iron to iron my applique piece to my background fabric. I made this small ironing board for that purpose. The ironing board is a thin piece of wood. I have my cotton fabric here and some quilt batting. I'm a quilter, so I always have quilt batting on hand. And then once you finish your design, you take the hoop, you remove the hoop from your machine, and then I keep the two pieces together and then turn it over, and that's when I remove or cut away the stabilizer. If your embroidery machine does not cut jump stitches, then you turn your hoop back over to the top, and then you would cut the jump stitches. But ideally you should keep your design in the hoop until you cut your jump stitches and you removed your stabilizer, because this helps just keep the project flat. So that's just a tip right there. And then you can decide whether or not you want to do more embroidery projects. I enjoy doing them. I like doing kitchen towels for my kitchen to hang on my stove. And one final consideration I want you to think about: you don't need it, but it helps with the thread. Your embroidery machine will have a place for your thread to house, but if you use a separate thread holder, thread stand, your thread can relax before it comes up to your machine. Like, this is a separate stand I have. I put my thread on it and then I loop it through right here. And then I feed it through my machine. So that gives the thread time to relax, because you see it's wound up on the spool. So it gives it time to relax, to travel up here. Yeah, it gives it time to travel up here, then travel through your machine. So you tend to get better results if you have an external thread stand. But that's something to consider once you know that you will be doing that you will be doing embroidery long term. They're not expensive, but in terms of basic supplies, this is something you need if you know that you're going to do embroidery a lot. But when you start off, you need thread, embroidery thread, bobbin thread, needles, and stabilizers. Those are the basics. And once you progress into doing applique, you need the heat and bond light. Ideally, you need to make sure you have an iron, a small iron available so that it can fit inside the hoop, because you don't want to remove your project from the hoop when you are ironing the heat and bond light for your applique. And you need a thumb drive. So I hope this helps you in your decision-making process. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me. Happy shopping and happy crafting.